Welcome to podcast Sarah and Michael.
So picture this for a second. You walk into an apartment in New York City, but every single electric light has been unscrewed or just completely switched off.
Okay, sounds a bit spooky already.
Right. And the windows are entirely sealed shut with these heavy, pitch-black curtains. The only illumination comes from the flickering glow of, like, dozens of candles scattered all around the room.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a scene from some sort of Victorian Gothic novel.
Exactly. But sitting right in the middle of this dramatic scene is a journalist staring at his television, and he is wearing thick, wraparound orange laser safety goggles.
Wait, laser safety goggles?
Yeah, he basically looks like he's actively trying to hide from his own TV screen.
I mean, honestly, just visualizing that setup makes it feel like a scene pulled straight from some dystopian sci-fi movie about surviving a solar flare or something.
It really does. But this isn't science fiction at all. This was the actual lived reality for BBC technology journalist Thomas Germain during this recent, just completely immersive experiment.
Wow.
And welcome to today's deep dive, by the way. We are talking about something that affects every single one of you listening right now, your sleep, and specifically that little screen glowing in your hand.
Which is such a huge topic.
It is, because for the better part of a decade, you've been told that the blue light emitting from your phone, your tablet, your television, is this sort of, photochromatic fiend, like a technological monster, actively ruining your sleep and destroying your circadian rhythms.
Yeah, and that narrative has just been so pervasive across almost every health blog and tech forum out there. I mean, it has spawned entire secondary industries of matte screen protectors, specialized glasses, and all those software settings designed to save us from this invisible threat.
Exactly. But today, our mission is to unpack the recent science alongside Germain's extreme candlelit experiment to reveal a genuinely shocking truth. And that is, the blue light from your screen is highly likely not the main culprit for your exhaustion.
Which is a huge paradigm shift.
It really is. And let's unpack this, because I know you are probably thinking, wait a minute, my phone has a night mode for a reason. I bought those expensive blue light blocking glasses for a reason. Tech companies wouldn't build this stuff if there wasn't a fire.
Right. People assume there has to be real science behind it.
Exactly. So to understand why we all bought into this massive global myth, we actually need to rewind the clock a bit. We need to go back to the year 2014. That's really when the public freakout officially went mainstream.
Yeah, ground zero for the blue light panic really does trace back to a very specific, widely publicized study from that year.
The famous iPad study.
That's the one. And the setup was fairly straightforward, which is honestly part of why it was so easily digestible for the evening news. Researchers took participants and had them read before bed. Half of the group read on an iPad.
Which, remember, was still a relatively new phenomenon back in 2014, using a tablet as your primary book in bed.
Exactly, it was a novel thing. And then the other half of the group read a traditional physical paper book under standard ambient bedroom lighting.
And the findings from that study seem like a massive smoking gun at the time. I mean, the people who read on the iPad took significantly longer to fall asleep, right?
They did. And they reported feeling noticeably groggier the next day. But perhaps most importantly for all those scary headlines, lab tests showed they actually produced less melatonin.
Which is the hormone our bodies naturally secrete to regulate our sleep cycles.
Exactly. So the researchers looked at that data and concluded that the culprit was the glow from the iPad's LED screen. Specifically, they pointed to the disproportionate amount of light in the upper bluer end of the visible spectrum.
Right, the dreaded blue light.
Yeah. They stated that this blue-enriched light was disrupting the body's natural pacemaker, the circadian rhythm. The media picked this up, subsequent research seemed to just blindly support the premise, and a global consensus was born.
Screen equals blue light equals suppressed melatonin, and suppressed melatonin equals terrible sleep. It sounds so incredibly simple.
It's a perfectly neat narrative with a clear villain and a clear victim.
But here's where we have to introduce Jamie Zeitzer into the conversation. He is a professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Stanford University, and his entire focus is studying the exact effect of light on the human circadian system.
And his take on that foundational 2014 study is, it's absolutely brutal.
Yeah, he literally calls it an incredibly deceptive piece of work.
Which is a heavy critique coming from a Stanford professor operating in the exact same field. But he clarifies that the science itself, like the physical measurements of melatonin taken in the lab, wasn't necessarily fabricated or inherently bad.
Right. The numbers were the numbers.
Exactly. The problem was that the study design fundamentally led the general public to terrible, sweeping conclusions about their daily habits. And a major part of that deception, whether it was intentional or just a byproduct of academic limitations, comes down to the sample size.
Oh my gosh, yes. I honestly had to read your notes twice when I saw this. Do you know how many people were in this study that changed how the entire world views screen time?
It's shockingly low.
12.
Mm.
A dozen people. Half of them on an iPad, half of them reading a book. 6 people reading on a tablet essentially sparked a multi-billion-dollar industry and a decade-long global panic.
It really highlights a persistent issue with how isolated scientific studies are sometimes translated into massive public health trends. I mean, the sample size of 12 is incredibly small, making it statistically hazardous to extrapolate those specific findings to the general population's everyday behavior.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here because if I'm listening to this, my natural skepticism is definitely flaring up.
Fair enough. Lay it on me.
Even if it was only 12 people, the scientists literally measured their biology. The iPad users actually produced less melatonin.
Yes, they did.
The screen clearly did something physical to alter their chemistry.
Yeah.
So how is the study deceptive if the biological markers were, in fact, suppressed?
That's a great question. And answering that requires us to look at the actual biological mechanics of how screens work and how our eyes perceive light. You are absolutely right that the screen did do something.
Okay, so I'm not totally crazy.
Not at all. But to understand the twist in this story, we first have to validate the underlying biology. And it starts with how modern screens are physically built.
Because we aren't looking at old-school incandescent light bulbs with glowing tungsten filaments anymore, right?
Right. Modern screens, and modern household light bulbs for that matter, use LEDs, light-emitting diodes. And here is a fascinating quirk of electrical engineering. LEDs cannot actually produce pure white light on their own.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's technologically impossible with a single diode. To give you that bright, crisp white background on your web browser or your word processor, engineers use a clever optical trick. They use a blue LED, and they physically coat it with a chemical called yellow phosphor.
Okay, so the pure white screen I'm looking at right now is basically an optical illusion. The blue light and the yellow filter mix together, and they just trick my human brain into perceiving the output as pure white light.
Exactly, and because the foundational base of that light is a blue LED, extra blue light is always leaking out of the spectrum. It's an inescapable byproduct of that specific technology.
I see.
And this leads us directly to the biology of your eye. Deep in your retina, you have a specific light-sensitive protein called melanopsin. This protein plays a massive central role in regulating your entire sleep-wake system by communicating directly with the master clock in your brain.
Okay, let me deduce how this connects. If the screen is constantly leaking a specific frequency of blue light, I'm assuming melanopsin is particularly sensitive to that exact frequency.
You nailed it. Melanopsin is highly tuned to blue light. I mean, it reacts to other colors in the visible spectrum, sure, but its strongest, most aggressive reaction is triggered by the blue wavelengths.
Which makes sense, right?
Yeah, from an evolutionary standpoint, this makes perfect sense. The sky is blue. For hundreds of thousands of years, the primary source of blue light was the daytime sky, signaling to our bodies that it was time to be alert and active.
Okay, so our eyes have this highly tuned chemical alarm system, the melanopsin. And this ancient alarm is tuned to the exact frequency of light that is constantly leaking out of our modern phones and laptops because of how LEDs are manufactured.
That is the biological reality, yes.
Honestly, it sounds like the absolute perfect recipe for global insomnia. I am really struggling to see the catch here. Why did the Stanford professor say the earlier studies were misleading if the biology lines up so perfectly?
Because the catch isn't about the presence of blue light. It is entirely about the volume.
The volume. Like how much light?
Exactly. In the scientific community, particularly in toxicology, this is known as the dose problem. We have to look at how those early lab studies, the ones that showed massive melatonin suppression, were actually conducted from a methodological standpoint.
Because they weren't just following people around their normal houses while they texted on the couch, right?
Not at all. In a laboratory setting, scientists need to isolate variables to prove causality. So they bring a participant into a highly controlled clinical environment. And here's the kicker. They keep that person in very, very dim light for the entire day.
Oh, wow. So they're essentially starving the eye of normal light exposure.
Yes. And then right before bed, they hit them with a bright light stimulus, the iPad, in a dark room.
Oh, They are artificially sensitizing the participants to the light. If you sit in a dark cave all day, lighting a single match is going to feel blinding.
Precisely. Under those highly specific, highly artificial circumstances, blue light absolutely makes the human body clock go haywire. The light-starved melanopsin reacts strongly, the brain gets confused, and melatonin is suppressed.
But that simply does not reflect a normal day in a human life.
No. We do not sit in pitch blackness for 16 hours waiting for an iPad to turn on.
So what happens when researchers actually look at data from the real world, where people, have windows and go outside and turn on overhead lights?
The picture changes dramatically. Recently, there was a massive aggregate review of 11 different modern studies concerning screen light and sleep. These studies looked at realistic exposure levels.
And what did they find?
When researchers aggregated all that data, the findings were staggering. The light from screens delays sleep by a maximum of about 9 minutes.
9 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not zero. The light is doing something to our chemistry. But a 9-minute delay is definitely not the life-altering, insomnia-inducing catastrophe we've been sold by the companies trying to sell us orange-tinted screen protectors.
Not at all. It doesn't even come close to explaining the chronic sleep issues so many people face. The math of our daily light exposure just doesn't add up to support the panic.
We had a really good statistic about this.
I did. There's this mind-blowing statistic from the recent research that really puts this into perspective. If you take a digital device like your smartphone on full brightness and you stare at it for 24 full hours.
A full day of absorbing that specific blue light.
Right. The total dosage of blue light you receive is equal to less than 1 minute spent outdoors in the midday sun.
I really want that to sink in for everyone listening. A full 24 hours of uninterrupted screen time delivers less blue light to your retinas than 60 seconds of just standing on your front porch in the sun.
It's incredible, isn't it? And to understand why the disparity is that massive, we have to talk about lux, which is the scientific unit of measurement for light intensity. Let's walk through the numbers to see how weak our screens actually are.
Okay, lay it on me.
When you are looking at your phone, even if it feels piercingly bright in a dark bedroom at midnight, it is only emitting roughly 50 to 80 lux.
Okay, 50 to 80 lux right in my face.
Now consider the ambient light in your average living room at night with a few lamps turned on. That environment is sitting at about 100 lux.
Wait, really? So the living room itself is already brighter than the focused beam of the phone?
Exactly. And what happens when we leave the house? Step outside on a completely gray, miserable, heavy, overcast day. The ambient light outside, even fighting through the clouds, is around 10,000 lux.
10,000.
And if you step outside on a bright, sunny afternoon, you are being bombarded with 100,000 lux.
Okay, so we are talking about 50 lux from the phone versus 100,000 lux from the sun. That is an astronomical difference.
It really is.
Worrying about the blue light from your phone before bed is like worrying about a dripping faucet in your kitchen while you are standing outside in a Category 5 hurricane. The sheer scale of the forces involved makes the phone almost mathematically irrelevant.
The volume of light coming from your screen is essentially a drop in the ocean compared to the natural light our bodies evolved to process. The melanopsin in our eyes requires massive environmental shifts in light to truly alter our master clock.
Okay, I am fully convinced by the math. The sun wins easily. But that leaves a massive glaring question. If the blue light isn't the villain, if it's just a leaky faucet, why are so many of us genuinely exhausted?
Right.
Why are millions of people tossing and turning until 3 a.m.? Because the fatigue is real, even if the scapegoat we've been blaming is wrong.
The fatigue is incredibly real, and sleep researchers point to two massive fundamental problems with our modern lifestyle that have absolutely nothing to do with screen color. The first is what Håvard Kallestad, a chronobiology researcher from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, calls the contrast problem.
The contrast problem. Let's dig into this. How does it work?
Think about the typical modern work-from-home life. You wake up, you maybe commute a few steps from your bed to your home office, or you drive in a dim car to a fluorescent-lit cubicle. You spend your entire day indoors, sitting in an environment that hovers right around that 100 lux mark.
Right.
Then evening comes, you stay indoors, maybe watch TV, and you are still in a 100 lux environment.
There is zero dynamic change. We are just existing in this perpetual indoor twilight zone from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep.
Exactly. The circadian rhythm, our internal body clock, relies on severe environmental contrast to know what time it is. It desperately needs a massive spike of intense light in the morning to say, wake up, start the engine, and a massive drop in light at night to say, shut it down.
And because we live our entire lives in this steady, dim hum, the body clock just loses its anchor.
It drifts. It has no idea what time it actually is, so it never fully wakes you up and it never fully puts you to sleep.
We are essentially confusing our biology by robbing it of the data it needs to set the clock.
Yep.
So how do we fix the contrast? Do we just need to install stadium lights in our kitchens?
Well, you have to manufacture that contrast artificially if you can't get it naturally. The solution requires huge, aggressive morning light exposure.
Okay.
During Thomas Germain's immersive experiment, every morning he sat mere inches away from a 1980s-style SAD lamp, a seasonal affective disorder lamp. These devices blast an incredibly bright, specifically blue-shifted light directly into your face.
Oh, yeah, he wrote about that in his article. He said it felt like sitting in front of a clinical sci-fi movie prop while trying to drink his morning coffee. That sounds miserable, but I guess it's effective.
Highly effective. It creates that required spike. By getting a massive, overwhelming dose of light in the morning, you actually prime your eyes and your brain. You build up a biological resilience.
So the master clock is set so firmly that by the time evening rolls around, that tiny 50 lux leaking out of your phone has absolutely zero power to disrupt the system. But not everyone wants to buy a specialized medical lamp just to eat cereal in front of. What is the alternative?
The simplest, most effective method is just utilizing the Category 5 hurricane we talked about, going outside.
Just walk out the door?
Yeah. A 30-minute walk in the morning, even on a cloudy day, gives you 10,000 lux. That is more than enough to anchor your clock. And Zeitzer, the Stanford professor, notes that getting a second dose of daylight in the late afternoon, right around 3:00 p.m., is also highly effective at fending off evening light sensitivity.
Okay, so if manufacturing that morning contrast fixes the biological clock, why are people who spend plenty of time outside still struggling to fall asleep? There has to be something else overriding the biology.
There is, and it brings us to the second major issue. Zeitzer argues it is the content problem.
Ah, the content problem.
If the physical light from the screen isn't keeping you awake, it is what you're actually doing on the device that is ruining your sleep.
Now we are getting to the uncomfortable truth.
Think about the fundamental nature of a smartphone. It is not a flashlight. It is a portal to infinite, highly stimulating algorithmic information. You aren't just passively staring at a blank, glowing rectangle. You are actively processing intense data.
Oh, man, yeah. Think about the last time you couldn't sleep. Were you lying awake, staring at the ceiling, simply because your retinas processed a few photons of blue light an hour earlier?
Probably not.
Or were you lying awake because you just read a deeply passive-aggressive work email at 11 p.m. and your mind is racing with how to reply? Or because you fell down a rabbit hole of endless, fast-paced political videos?
That psychological stimulation is the real monster in the room. It easily trumps the minor biological effect of the screen's light. When you read a stressful email or engage with enraging content, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in.
Fight or flight.
Exactly. Your adrenal glands release cortisol, a primary stress hormone. That cortisol actively fights against your sleep drive. Your brain is essentially being told there is an immediate threat in the environment we cannot safely shut down right now.
It's an evolutionary override. I mean, the body might want to sleep, melatonin might be trying to do its job, but the cortisol is screaming that there's a tiger in the room, even if that tiger is just a tweet.
Which is such a weird modern problem to have.
We are wiring ourselves up emotionally right before we try to rest.
Which brings us fully back to Thomas Germain's extreme experiment in his apartment. Remember, he went to incredible, almost comical length to banish all blue light from his life.
Right, the blackout curtains, the candlelight, the laser safety goggles that literally made blue neon signs outside his apartment window turn completely invisible.
Yeah, he really committed.
So after 2 weeks of living like a medieval monk with high-tech eyewear, what actually happened? Did he discover the secret to perfect, uninterrupted sleep?
Well, the results of his experiment were fascinating, specifically because of what didn't change in the data. According to his clinical sleep tracker, the actual duration of his sleep, the total hours and minutes he spent unconscious, did not increase in any statistically meaningful way.
Wait, seriously? All that effort? Living by candlelight and wearing ski goggles indoors? And he didn't actually sleep any longer?
Nope. However, his bedtime became significantly more consistent. He found himself naturally wanting to get into bed at the exact same time every night, and he reported feeling like it was noticeably easier to transition from waking to sleeping.
Okay, wait, let me get this straight. If we just established that the blue light itself is biologically insignificant compared to daylight, And we know his laser goggles aren't fixing a chemical imbalance with melanopsin. Why did he feel a tangible improvement?
It's a great question.
Why did his bedtime regulate so beautifully? And for that matter, if the warm yellow tint doesn't actually matter biologically, why do so many people swear by their phone's night mode?
This is where we transition from the hard biology of sleep into the psychology of sleep, which can be just as powerful in dictating our behavior. The reason Jermaine felt better, and the reason your phone's night mode might actually be helping you fall asleep, is based on what Zeitzer identifies as a Pavlovian conditioning cue.
Oh, classical conditioning, like Ivan Pavlov ringing the bell and the dogs learning to salivate because they associate the sound with dinner.
Precisely the same mechanism. Biologically, the orange tint on your screen isn't saving your melatonin levels, but psychologically, when your screen suddenly shifts from stark white to a warm, dim amber color at 9:00 p.m., it acts as a massive behavioral trigger.
It's a signal.
Yes. It sends a learned signal to your brain saying, the active part of the day is over, it is time to start winding down.
The brain loves a good ritual. I mean, we're essentially tricking ourselves into getting tired by creating a visual cue.
Exactly. When Germain spent weeks meticulously lighting candles, turning off lamps, and putting on his absurd glasses, he was building a massive, unavoidable behavioral ritual. It physically forced him to transition away from the frantic energy of the day.
Right, because you can't really doom scroll the same way while wearing laser goggles in a dark room.
It just doesn't hit the same.
So the ritual of the amber screen, or the deliberate act of lighting a candle, is really just a physical bedtime story we tell our nervous system. It isn't the absence of blue light changing our chemistry. It's the routine signaling safety and rest to our frantic, modern brains.
The routine is what calms the nervous system and lowers the cortisol, not the absence of 50 lux of blue light.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, completely dismantling a decade-old myth. Let's bring this all together so you can actually use it tonight. What are the core takeaways?
Let's summarize it.
First and foremost, the blue light emitting from your phone is just a drop in the ocean compared to the power of the sun. It is not the toxic, sleep-destroying villain it has been made out to be by that single, flawed study from 2014.
The scale of light matters immensely, and screens simply do not output enough volume or intensity to override a healthy, well-anchored circadian rhythm.
Secondly, if you want to actually fix your sleep, you have to focus on your daytime behavior just as much as your nighttime routine. You need bright, natural light during the morning and the afternoon to create that crucial contrast your body clock desperately craves to know what time it is.
And finally, you have to ruthlessly manage the content you consume.
Yes, the doom scrolling.
You need to stop engaging with highly stimulating, stressful, or infinitely scrolling information right before you try to close your eyes. The anxiety induced by a late-night email or doom scrolling session is infinitely worse for your sleep architecture than the physical glow of the screen you read it on.
It is entirely about how we manage our environment and our minds. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. Because when you really step back and look at the data we've discussed today, it points to a much larger structural issue than just smartphones.
It really does. It raises a profound and honestly slightly unsettling question about how we have physically built our modern world.
Yep.
If our biology is this desperate for high contrast light, if our brains physically require the blinding brightness of a sunny morning and the deep darkness of night just to know when to sleep and wake, perhaps the true enemy of our biological rhythms isn't the technology sitting in our pockets at all.
It goes way deeper than a scream.
We have to ask ourselves, is the fundamental architecture of modern indoor living, our dim offices, our curtain-drawn apartments, our constant 100 lux existence, accidentally designed to keep the entire human race in a state of perpetual low-grade jet lag?
Oh man, now that is a thought that will keep you awake at night. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take care of yourselves, put the phone down when you feel your stress levels rising, and seriously, go outside and get some sunlight today.